Hey, this is Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanism in Marvel Remix. This is a kind of a sequel to the game Fantasy Realms, which was also the inspiration for one of my games called Red Rising. But in Marvel Remix, you are assembling a hand of heroes, or you really start out with a hand of heroes and a villain in that hand, and over the course of the game, you are crafting that hand to score as many points as possible at the end of the game. It's a filler game, lasts around maybe 10 to 15 minutes at most. And I played a 3-player game just the other day and really enjoyed it. I love Fantasy Realms and I love Marvel, so this was a great mashup. And it does some things that really make it stand out from Fantasy Realms, in my opinion. One is, I just mentioned that you start out with a hand of heroes. You can see them. They have this card back here. They're not necessarily heroes, but they're cards related to doing heroic things. And you start out with one villain card. So it's a different deck of cards. Villains like Ultron and Taskmaster, Killmonger. Villains from the Marvel Universe. You start out with one of them. And on your turn, you are either gaining a face-up card and then discarding a card, or you are gaining a card from the villain deck or the remix deck and adding it to your hand. And this ties into one of my favorite mechanisms, not quite my favorite, but I think this is really clever, in that all of the villains, or the common theme among villains, for the most part, is that they give you, and this, I don't have, let's see, most of them, many of them, like here's one for Hela. I had this one in my head. So Hela gives you negative points, negative 20 points, unless with 2 or more other, and it shows you a specific icon. And so many of the villains do this. Like, they are a powerful card. They're worth a lot of points, but they are worth negative points, so they go down significantly in points if you haven't met a certain condition, which I think makes sense for a villain. It gives you a reason to craft your hand around these cards so that this condition is met. And you craft your hand around those cards with your heroes. And at the end of the game, you need to have at least one villain in your hand, and you need to have at least one hero in your hand. This plays into the theme of you are having heroes compete against villains, kind of telling the plot of a movie, essentially. These are the villains in your movie. Here are the heroes that appear in your movie and the things that they're doing in your movie. So I think that's pretty cool in itself. And I like that they're separate decks. Gives you a little bit more control over which card you want in your hand at any given time. However, my favorite mechanism, I love cards that flip around and do something that can become a little better or become a little different by flipping, rotating, flipping over onto the backside. And this game does that in a few different ways. So here are a few examples here. So if I gain the Tony Stark card, he is just Tony Stark. However, if I've met the condition on the card, so it says transform with 2 or more of that icon. So if I find two other cards with that icon by the end of the game and I have them in my hand, at the end of the game, instead of being Tony Stark, he is Iron Man at the end of the game, which you can see he's worth more points. He has more icons over there on the left, which can trigger other benefits. He's just better. Same with Thor Odinson. So with Thor Odinson, he says transform with Mjolnir or 2 or more allies. So if I have found his mighty hammer, or I find some ally cards to go along with Thor, then he transforms into the god of thunder, making him and many more points, many more icons there. I think this is a really cool mechanism, and I love the card layout. I always am curious how flipped cards will be laid out to make it pretty intuitive. But I think it's pretty darn intuitive here. I think it works well. The focus when I'm looking at these cards is on the face-up art, the face-up icons, and the face-up text. And then when I flip them, the same is true. Let's have those consistent there. Yeah. So I think that's a really neat flipping mechanism here. Makes me want to include some cards in some of my games. I don't think I have any cards right now that flip over in that way. It makes me want to try to do that and see how it feels. But yeah, I think that's a really cool mechanism. Yeah. That's my favorite mechanism in Marvel Remix. Let me know your thoughts if you have played Marvel Remix, if you have a favorite mechanism there, if you can think of another game where cards flip over. Happens a lot in Magic. Magic the Gathering has a lot of cards that flip around. There's a trick-taking game where I believe it happens, but I haven't played that one in a while. But yeah, let me know if there's any games that you think of that have a card flipping mechanism that is triggered by something that you do in the game, or whatever reason. Anything goes for that flipping mechanism. Thanks.